The question I have, and what is tonight's theme, is does anybody even believe the Epstein victim story? Because I do. And if you read this carefully, like some people jumped ahead of time, jumped and says, "You're the problem." See, nobody even knows what I'm trying to say. See, people love to get pissed off. They don't know what I'm saying. They don't know what anybody's saying. They don't read. They just love to get angry. So I want everybody to calm down and ask yourself a simple question. The bottom line of Epstein, all of this talk, is does anybody believe these women? And if you do believe them, what do you believe? Because here's the problem. And by the way, the reaction to this is a reaction because people just love to, they just love to get upset. Nobody knows what the hell you're talking about. They just love to get upset. But that's this venue, if you will. The thing that makes the issue that is of importance here, in this particular case, the issue is that of consent, with the exception of anybody who was under the age of consent. If these women consented to the act of either having sexual relations with men, again, if it's not prostitution for purposes of some type of fee, but if there was consent, the issue then becomes, does anybody believe them? I can't believe the number of people who don't believe these women, and they know nothing about it. The first question is, under the laws of the states, of the 50 states for the most part, and the federal government, what does prostitution mean? What does it entail? That's the question first. Because people have this idea that a woman cannot possibly be involved in this because, they just don't. These women, they're just after a buck. This is what people are saying. This is what they're saying. A sexual act offered to perform in exchange for something of value is pretty much what we're talking about. An offer or agreement to engage in some type of sexual act, compensation, and the intent to do so. But I can't believe the number of people that I hear, people that I know who immediately think, oh, these women, they're just doing this to make a buck. They don't really mean this. They did, they're just saying, how do you know? Let me ask you a question. I think I've been doing this for a long time. And I first was involved in the I guess prosecution 42 years ago when I first started this. So I've been involved in this for a long time. Would you ever, if you were a young woman right now today, let's make it very, very simple. A young woman, older woman, doesn't matter. But if you were involved in something where you were the victim of some type of sexual, let's say, battery, and it was involving somebody, not a complete stranger, but let's say somebody who was on a date or somebody that you knew, and assuming there wasn't any serious physical trauma that you could relate to in terms of an emergency room, would you ever suggest somebody calling the police for that? Would you? Yes or no? Oh, we got some French victims. The victims, what am I saying? French watchers tonight. Thank you so much. Would you? Would you? Would you? Would you? Would you? Start off with this. Ladies, if there are women here, every woman, I think, walking the planet, if she's lived long enough, if she's been in the, I don't know, I don't want to say not the right places, but she has probably had an experience that would definitely be considered either inappropriate or, forgive me, my lips are so cracked. Pardon me. They probably remember this. And the number of women who themselves were involved in something which, by the way, this is YouTube, so we can't say it, were involved in the R word. I'll bet you the numbers are through the roof. But there wasn't physical violence. There's nothing to go to a hospital for. There's nothing. There's now remember in the case of a stranger, that's one thing, but somebody that you knew. How many of you have ever had to deal with a police officer, a male? And listen, we love police officers; they're wonderful people. God love them, but sometimes they can't even handle accidents with any feeling of compassion. It's brutal. It's brutal. These women many of them went to the Department of Justice. And by the way, let's just say this. Of course, there's going to be somebody somewhere who's going to try to make a buck. Of course there is. There are people who do slip and falls. There are people who feign and contrive personal injury accidents in order to make a few bucks. I understand that. But do you believe these women? This is the strangest thing. How do you, with the exception of people who were younger, and by the way, you got to ask the question, where were their parents? What difference does it matter? If you're 11 years old, 12 years old, 13, 14, if you were under the age of 18 and you were involved in this behavior, should you be believed? Do you believe there's honestly any kind of compassion for them? Because I submit to you, a lot of times there isn't. And the reason why this type of behavior is something that transcends anything there is. Let me give you an example. This has nothing to do with this, but one of the hardest cases to prosecute sometimes, harder than you think, is DUI. Because nobody ever intends to commit DUI. Nobody ever says, I'm going to go out, I'm going to drink to the extent that my normal faculties are impaired to get behind the wheel of a car and I'm going to risk. No, it's normally an accident. It's like, oh, Jesus. Every other crime you intend to rob or steal or batter but it's one of those weird kind of like, oops, it's kind of like an oops. It's a negligence effect. In this particular case, the only thing, with the exception of a minor, is consent. The moment you consent, if you're an adult, it's over with. Now, depending upon the jurisdiction, prostitution may or may not be involved. But in the case of Epstein, I don't know if it's prostitution because I don't think any of Epstein's guests or whatever paid for these women. I think it was just a matter of they were made available. Okay, it was a different story. So these girls themselves, assuming they were of age, were not, I think, amenable to being charged or committing prostitution. But when you're talking about trafficking, what defines it? Trafficking doesn't mean moving anybody. This traffic, people always think it has something to do with like a traffic, like moving people. It means dealing in something, dealing in human lives, dealing in bodies, dealing in souls, dealing in people through force, fraud, or coercion. So you're going to have to remember, with the exception of people underage, if you are underage, that's it. But if you have somebody, let's say, who's 18, 19, 20 years old, who said, I was beaten down, I was fooled, I was cajoled, I was wheedled, I was led into this behavior. I was, by virtue of the circumstance, I was kind of in a mindset where I didn't know what I was doing. There may not be a charge there. I mean, good luck. Remember, with the exception of a minor. So if you want to have files released, if somebody, let's say you're Larry Summers, and Larry Summers was involved, let's say, with a woman who was an adult, what are you going to be releasing? What are you going to be releasing? What? What files? He could say, they're an adult. I didn't pay anybody for anything where I was having a sexual relationship with this woman. They were there. They were part of Epstein's girls, like Hugh Hefner's, like the bunnies, like, like a lot of the groupies and people who hang around Diddy and others. It's a very complicated issue. So in the reason why this is so complicated is the nature of the offense itself. With the exception of minors, I say yet again, with the exception of minors, and with the exception of somebody who is basically kept against their will, forced, fraud, coercion. I mean trafficked, where they're threatened, their passport is taken. You're going to find in many respects cases where that's not the case. That's not it. But moving this along, women, I ask women, how do you think people deal with the notion of you being involved in some type of sexual uh, transgression where you're the victim? Who in their right mind would want to submit themselves to this? Especially, remember, if there's violence, if it's a stranger, that's another story. If there's evidence of a break-in, evidence of force, yes, obviously. But even that, I know the police do a wonderful job, but I have seen where sometimes they take the worst people and they just, I mean, they make women feel like, what am I doing? What's going on here? Sometimes in the case, maybe not anymore, but sometimes they've lost the particular testing kits that are responsible for this. Maybe through DNA, they're able to do something. But the issue comes down to consent. So what I'm trying to say is this is a very complicated issue. The issue is, do people believe the women? Right off the bat, let's take a sample. Do you believe that for the most part, with the exception maybe of women, because we really don't know the number of girls, young girls, because remember, they went and they charged. They went to the Department of Justice. They brought these cases. Some people are saying, why did they charge? Why did they sue? Why didn't they individually go after these powerful men? But do you believe this? This is the issue. We've got a problem. This goes so much to show how people view this. This is not just about Epstein. This is about a lot of things. This is about a lot of issues that have to do with the way we deal with sexual violence. And not just with children, but with women. That's the bottom line. And good luck trying to get a lot of people to understand this, especially most of the people on social media, because they're morons. Let's face it, they're morons. They don't understand it. There's no nuance to them. They don't understand any of this stuff. They barely get it. Their whole thing is release the files. Release what files? Release the logs. What logs? There's no client logs. They just say these things because you got to understand most people are morons. They don't understand this. They don't grasp it. And what we should be doing is we should be really talking about, as many people say, we should be having a conversation regarding the issue of this subject matter in particular. But then we've got to get to some other ones. Why are some women involved in this? Do you know how many women, if you were to allow sex work, if you will, or if you were to say, I'm Jeffrey Epstein. I have women who come and they are like Hugh Hefner was, like the Playboy bunnies. You can be out and about. You can be at by the pool or whatever it is. And if there's any kind of sexual activity, I'm not going to necessarily tell you outright that that's your job. But do you know how many people would line up for that? How many do you think? How many do you think? How many do you think? How many women right now would absolutely be lining up knowing Diddy's case. Diddy never got, remember, Diddy in his particular case, he never threw anybody in the back of a white van. They never bludgeoned or truncheoned anybody. Nobody was drugged or forced against their will. It's a very, and I'm saying this again for the millionth time, with the exception of minors. Minors is a different story. Question to you: do you believe in the case of an adult that there would be any case that he would have against Epstein for force, fraud, or coercion? Do you believe they knowingly, voluntarily, intelligently, knowingly participated in sexual behaviors, escapades with people? And if you found out that they could have left, would that change at all your mindset? Would you? Would that make any difference? Do you understand what's happening? This is the part which I want you to really think about this. I'm curious as to what you think. And I'm curious in particular as to what women think, because most men don't, they're talking about this because it's a very, very complicated issue. The issue of Epstein, you're talking about, what is it? Define it. What are the people that we're talking about here? With the exception of young people. And by the way, here's another one. This is the most important thing. What are we supposed to do with people who went to the Department of Justice, did the right thing, believed that their cases would be heard, and they were ignored? What do you think? Judith writes, I think most women are afraid to see how they really feel. Absolutely. Who in their right mind? And let me tell you something too. A lot of women, and you don't want to hear this, but a lot of women themselves are very suspect of this. Now, we all know there are some women who, for a variety of reasons, again, very gray areas here, they will say, you know what? I perhaps maybe have lived in a world, maybe they themselves have been involved in the system, maybe they were abused as a young person, maybe they were involved in the notion of commercializing their own bodies sexually. Maybe they were raised that way. Maybe that's how they got attention. That's how they made a name for themselves. Maybe that, we don't know this. It's a very, very complicated issue. And maybe there were some people who were saying, yes, I theoretically voluntarily involved myself with it, but they are of such tarnished souls to begin with. Their own sense of self-worth has been so depleted and beaten throughout the years. It's almost to the point where they constructively are not able to consent. This is something. Someone writes, someone was kicked in the hallway of a hotel. That's Diddy. That's battery. And remember, she settled for 20, I don't know how many $1 million. Not that excuses it, but that's a different story. That's physical violence. Someone says, I think they wanted the money and then had buyer's regret. I don't know. First question. If you watched out, okay? If you walked out and you wanted to be involved in, let's say something, let's assume you had been a part of dealing with these people initially. Let's assume. And you could have gone back in time and you could have met. By the way, age of consent could be 18, 21. For the most part, it might be 18. 18 is almost universal. It depends upon a lot of things. But let me go back and let me see if let me change a few things here. Let me see if I can close a few things down. I don't want to buffer because this is very, very important. And by the way, I want you to understand, I'm really trying to talk to some very serious people here. And I don't necessarily like to shut people down, but you don't understand it. I absolutely cannot babysit morons anymore. I just can't. This is a chance to have a great discussion about a very serious issue with very smart people And every now and then there's these morons who just come through, and I know they don't mean it, but I'm just so tired of stupid people. You don't understand something. I'm just so tired of idiots. I'm really tired of it. But let me ask you this. See, 16 in the UK, it depends where it is. But either way, if you could have gone back and you could have said, ladies, I'm from the future. And all of you women, do you know what you're doing here? They would say yes. Do you know, with the exception of people who are themselves minors, remember, I'm saying this repeatedly to the point of exhaustion. Do you know what you're doing? How many women would say, I know exactly what I'm doing? I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. This is the issue. There are people I have met, worked with indirectly as a prosecutor, but also defending in many respects, women who have been part of dancers. Sometimes they were new dancers. Sometimes, in one particular case, their husband was a police officer. They were they used to have massage parlors, still do, dancers and the like. This is a sense of sexual commerce. They sell themselves, either their body to look at, and in some cases, their body to deal with. They do it voluntarily. Is a woman able to consent to do that? Yes or no? Someone said they love the attention. It's every woman's Achilles heel. Now add money and power into the mix. But in this case here, we're not talking about women who are necessarily making any money. Do you understand what's happening here? Many of these women were themselves lured, cajoled, brought in, recruited from other girls who themselves were a part of the Epstein case. So they said, listen, I'm doing this. I'm making money. We're going to go Louis Vuitton shopping. We're going to go to this island or Zorro or the island or the Mans. Some of us are masseuses, others aren't. What do you think? Recruitment was never an issue. Judith writes, I think most of age women know exactly what they are doing. Then they see a way of getting more money by playing the victim. In some cases, that's true. If indeed they are adults. If they are adults. Do you see, just nod somehow. Do you see the spectrum, the continuum? This is not a one size fits all. Virginia Giuffre will claim that she was manipulated, she was underage, and once you are underage, you could be the most sophisticated woman. You could have been, at the age of 16, 17 years old, you could have had 1,000 sexual partners. You could have done it what you thought consensually, but the law says no. The law says no, you can't consent. You can't do this. It's like driving a car. He does this. If you don't have a license, you can't drive a car, even though you're driving the car. Even though you knew what you were doing, you've been driving the car before. The law says no, you have no status. You are not legal to drive a car. You are not required. It's sometimes, absent the case of infants, children, it's a different story. That's obvious. When you get older, it is still against the law. But what I'm saying is, why do you think, do you believe people really, really, really understand the complexity of what's going on and how much of this is happening right now? Ladies, who remembers in the 70s and 80s when women were, how do I say this? When the supermodels, remember Eileen Ford and was it Casablancas or whatever, these these not Wyguard or whatever his name is, but there were modeling agencies, and these girls were brought, many of them from Ukraine. They were given cocaine and coffee. They had to maintain no weight. They weren't necessarily sexually trafficked, but they were commercialized by virtue of who they were. It was incredible. Some of these were minors, and I'm sure they themselves fell into some pretty nasty events that happened as well. Bottom line is, I don't think people really understand what Epstein's about. I think most people are interested in bringing down a Bill Clinton, a Bill Gates, a Larry Summers, versus worrying about the girls. I think the majority of them, their goal is to embarrass people in power. I think that's what they want to do. That's their focus. They don't really care about other women. And let me tell you something. Do not take this the wrong way. You know who were the worst? Women. Women themselves can be more aware of the level of suspicion that is accorded and afforded people in this particular venture. It's just very complicated. And the thing is that it would be wonderful if we could talk about this, but we can't, because in the world of news that we live in 30-second, 1-minute blocks, and nobody really wants to talk about it. There are variations that fall under the same rubric. Anybody who is involved in children, that is a different category. Move them out of the way. Take those individuals, whether it's Epstein or Ghislaine or anybody else involved in children, throw the book at them, absolutely destroy them. Sometimes you might find somebody who says, gee, I didn't know she was, and then other times specifically, absolutely that these were children. In fact, by virtue of what is said, by the descriptions, by the texting, a lot of times people will say specifically, this is what I'm looking for. So let's move this over here. It's the other cases that become a problem. That becomes a problem. That becomes a problem. And in those cases where somebody is not a child, but somebody is, let's say, older, illegal, they might be able to fall under the category of trafficking, sex fraud, or coercion, but it's a different story altogether. Let me tell you something. This is a very complicated issue, and I don't believe that we're ever. How do I say this? We're not really able, I think, intellectually to handle this, because most people, as I told you specifically, are going not to protect the women, but they want to do it to prosecute, to embarrass people in power. That's their goal. So let me leave it at this. I want you to think about this, my friends. I'm going to put a comment section after. I want you very, very much, especially women, because I think you're wiser, smarter, more experienced, and I think your perspective, frankly, is much greater than that of men in this case. Sorry, I just believe that. It's a very complicated issue, exceedingly complicated. More so when you get rid of the obvious. Oh my God, the nuances. And what is it? If Larry Summers involved himself in, I don't know the full accusations, but if he was involved with just consensual sex with women who were over the age of 18, what difference does it matter? Happens all the time. Washington is filled with it. Washington, entertainment, it's everywhere. And it's one of those things, put it that way. The real issue is, why is it that we are so sexually immature? And why is it that there are so many men who are really royally, as the kids say, effed up when it comes to this particular situation? So anyway, thank you for this. Let me remind you, I'm going to be talking about this eve, 1 to 5, overnights on WABC. Oh, it'll be a barn burner. It's a topic which is the most fascinating. And it's a topic which I love to be able to spend some time really getting to the heart of it. And that means getting rid and I don't think this is the best avenue, the best way to do it because first of all, people can't write. Number two, you have a bunch of jerk offs who basically want to weigh in and really say nothing. And I just don't think it lends itself. So, in any event, I'm going to be having some questions in the follow up section. I thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you so much. And remember how this sentence was or this story was presented. Do people even believe the women? Not from a negative point of view, but in practice, does anybody even talk about believing them? I still say it is the focus of people to embarrass men of power, not to prosecute or protect or adjudicate the rights of women who themselves have been caught up in this. In any event, thank you. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. Please, I ask you to keep us going. And I'm going to have some questions coming up. I want to see what you have to say. So, in any event, thank you so much. And as we always say, a comment as you see fit, which is what we say, or the monkey's dead, the show's over, sue you, or any combination thereof. But I really want you to weigh in, especially women, because you are far more sagacious and sapient and wise than most of the jadrul jerk-offs, men who are more interested trying to be funny. Again, this attempt to be funny, they're not even funny. It goes to show you their own immaturity, which is, I think, part and parcel with one of the reasons why we have so many problems in the first place, because so many men are children. And when it comes to matters that are of sex and romance and feelings, they treat women like chattel because they themselves are such damaged goods. But that's for another discussion. In any event, thanks for watching. And now comment as you see fit.